Phil D. Murphy took the oath of office for a second term in New Jersey as the 56th governor on January 18, 2022. He is the first Democratic governor to serve a second term in 44 years. His victory given the difficult environment for Democrats last November, reflects his outstanding record. Since first taking office in 2018, Governor Murphy has focused on building a stronger, fairer, and more affordable New Jersey. Under his leadership, the state has created new economic opportunities while shrinking long-standing inequities. He has restored fiscal responsibility to state government while expanding critical investments, and delivered real tax fairness and relief, including 14 tax cuts for New Jersey's middle class and seniors. Moreover, Governor Murphy guided New Jersey from being the epicenter of the COVID-19 pandemic to representing a model state for following the highest level of public health standards, implementing among the nation's most robust vaccination efforts, and fostering a strong economic recovery. Over the course of 2 years, the Murphy administration has provided billions in state and federal relief to small businesses, schools, homeowners, tenants, and middle-class families. And Governor Murphy secured the dignity of working families by moving to a 15 per hour minimum wage, enacting one of the most expansive earned sick days. He also put in an expansion to NJ's paid family leave. The governor has enacted initiatives to provide a tuition-free public college education for qualified students. He has embraced policies that have driven down the cost of healthcare and expanded access, including reproductive health care, maternal health care, and coverage for all kids. He has expanded protections for the state's immigrant and LGBTQIA+ communities, and has enacted some of the strongest national gun safety laws to combat gun violence and promote responsible gun ownership. Governor Murphy has also made New Jersey a model state for social justice through enacting one of the country's strongest automatic voter registration measures, restoring voting rights to individuals on parole and probation, expunging the records of numerous nonviolent offenders, and creating the nation's strongest provisions for environmental justice. These examples, which I knew I needed to go through just to tell you that they're a small fraction, a tiny fraction of what was accomplished during the last 4.5 years. It is a long and impressive list because, and this is an important because, of the help and at times push from NJPP and the other organizations in this room. For many of these victories, NJPP provided the fact-based research and testimony in collaboration and coordination with our sister organizations that are here today to accomplish these. Despite these many accomplishments, this is not the time to take a victory lap. In the face of huge and entrenched power and inequities, bold policies are required to further economic justice and shared prosperity. And Governor, we look forward to working together to implement a truly inclusive, multiracial New Jersey where Power is shared, and no one is left behind. Thank you so much for taking the time to come and talk to us. Thank you, Governor.
This is a great room of a lot of friends and allies. Good morning, everybody. It's great to be here. Marcia, more on you in a moment. And you'll forgive me, I want to talk a little bit about what's going on in New Jersey, but also what's going on and what's at stake nationally. Two observations that are not part of my prepared remarks. Number one, I really enjoyed the tail end of that discussion, particularly about the census. And you all were incredibly important in that, and many other sister and brother organizations in this room were incredibly important in getting the result that we did. And all I heard for the first several years of our administration was there were a lot of moving vans in New Jersey. And it turns out a fair number of those vans were bringing people in and not just leaving the state. So that's gratifying and real. And by the way, sadly, in many cases for the wrong reasons, i.e. a pandemic, since the census was completed. By the way, we grew at the exact median of the American states in the last decade. Hi, Fran. Hi, Christian. Give some shout outs here occasionally through my remarks. Everybody's waving at me with all five fingers, as Brendan Burns said, which is not always the case. It's a home game, this room. We grew at about 5.25% in the last decade, but we've had a huge influx, especially either from New York or from folks who otherwise were going to New York and instead have hung their hat in places like Jersey City, and to some extent out of Philadelphia due to the pandemic. I also think people are coming for a lot of the positive things we're doing, but there's no question that was part of the surge post-census. But the third and final point, again, I want to come back to on this, is that organizations like this and organizations represented in the room, this census result didn't just happen, even though the math was in our favor. We had to go out, we put, I think, $9 million in our state budget. Organizations worked their tails off. Our Secretary of State did an extraordinary job. All of you in this room did an extraordinary job, and we got a really good result. New York State, by the way, lost a seat in the House. I can't fathom losing a seat right now, given all the federal monies at stake. And I didn't know at the time that we'd have a pandemic, the American Rescue Plan money, the bipartisan infrastructure money, the CHIPS technology money, the IRA, both healthcare and climate money. Had we lost a seat in the House, because a lot of this is formulaic, we would have gotten a lot less money. And so hats off to each of you. And then secondly, I want to pay respect to the front who are exercising their rightful right to raise the concerns that they have about fossil fuel. There are many folks who we've sat with and will continue to sit with. It's not that we don't see the same endpoint, because we do. There is a legitimate discussion about how, when, not whether, how, when. And it's complicated. And I always say to them in jest, I hope you're protesting in Oklahoma and Texas and other places like that, because I'll put our environmental record up against any other American state, bar none. But they have every right to express themselves. God bless them all. With that being said, thank you for having me. It's great to be here. First of all, I want to acknowledge my dear friend, your board chair, Marcia Marley. I want to thank you for that incredible introduction. As I was listening to your words, I think you have stolen my entire set of remarks, other than I'm going to comment about democracy, but you said it really well. Marcia and I have known each other for a long, long time. And Marcia gave me time when it was cold, dark, and lonely for yours truly. I was far from even being a candidate. I remember having lunch at the Molly Pitcher Inn in Red Bank. I think that was in 2014. And I will just say this. Of all the appointments that I've made as governor, the one that makes me about as proud as any is appointing Marcia, and on the same day, 3 other women to be board members of the New Jersey Economic Development Authority, now nearly 3 years ago. And that was, yeah. So hang on to that thought, because I'm going to circle back to that in a couple minutes. I want to thank the entire New Jersey Policy Perspective team for putting together this conference. This is now, I think, the 3rd time that I've had the pleasure to stand up here as governor, and the 4th time that I've addressed the gathering overall. And I'm incredibly humbled and honored that you keep having me back. To President Nicole Rodriguez and everybody at NJPP, I truly mean it when I say that there is no other think tank in New Jersey whose insights are as meaningful, knowledgeable, and invaluable to the cause of sound and transformative public policy. And I just said to Marcia when she was going back to her seat, I loved her phrase that in many cases, the stuff we got done was with your help, and occasionally you pushed us. And I appreciate that enormously. I hope you didn't have to push too hard, but I appreciate that. And by the way, having a new weekly newsletter that kicks off with a picture of someone's pet does not hurt your cause either. Right? Is that you? Okay. I love that. I was just sitting in your chair. I was told if I didn't move, you'd put up one of my pets. But we just, Tammy and I and our kids just somewhat famously adopted a beagle that was otherwise going to be euthanized from Virginia. His name is Morty, as in Rick and Morty. And he's quite a handful. I'll leave it at that. And to each of you here today, regardless of whether you come from the corporate, the advocacy, philanthropic, academic, or other community, thank you from the bottom of my heart for all that you do to make our state as great as it is and the state of opportunity. And I think Marcia alluded to this. Nobody in our administration, I can guarantee you, not yours truly, is ever going to pat ourselves on the back or spike a football or claim victory. We have come in almost now 5 years, and think of the mess that we inherited. And you could define that mess in so many ways. But we have come so far, but let there be no doubt, we are on a journey and there is still much road still to travel. As I said, we've been together now in government with you all for almost 5 years. And when you consider the time that I spent with many of you in this room, even before, as I mentioned, Marcia is a great example, even before, long before I announced my intention to seek this office, to listen and learn, to toss ideas back and forth, and to just get acquainted. It's really not 5 years, it's closer now to 8 years. Throughout this time, we've come together under, I think, a common North Star, a belief that the old politics was holding our state and our residents back, a belief that we needed to once again dare to think big and do big things, a belief that we could do both well as a state and do good by our people, a belief that our best days are still, without question, before us, and a recognition that there were so many others who shared in this belief. By and large, as Marcia mentioned, and I'll acknowledge, we've gotten some pretty big things done. And I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time running through the entire laundry list of accomplishments. You know them just as well as I do, if not even more so, frankly, given that in many cases you were the ones who led the fights and organized on the ground. I mentioned Fran and Christian. So many brothers and sisters in labor have been extraordinary at every step of the way. We don't get done what we get done without their support, without NJPP's and other organizations' support. Sue, is that you? How are you? I didn't recognize you. Nice to see you. And also, I won't be up here for long, but I do want to acknowledge a couple of things. On issue after issue, workers' rights, and as Marcia mentioned, a stronger minimum wage. Remember how we had to battle for $15 minimum wage and how hard that was? That looks quaint today. That looks at, with the amount of money people are paying just to get somebody to bus tables in restaurants. But the fight was extraordinary. We still wear it, by the way, as a badge of honor because it was a big, big deal. But the folks who were opposed to it, come on. Environmental justice and a cleaner, green energy future to fight climate change, protecting and expanding voting rights. I want to come back to that in a minute. Making healthcare and childcare both more accessible and more affordable. Remember how hard this one was, Marcia? Enacting the millionaire's tax. Took us, what, 3 years? And by the way, may I say this? May I say this? As we predicted, there are more millionaires in New Jersey today than ever before. Creating the state child tax credit and expanding the earned income tax credit, right? By the way, all so we could do more for the middle class and those as I was growing up, looking up, hoping someday to get into the middle class. Keeping our public schools the prides of our communities and the envy of our nation. Putting a college education back within reach of anyone willing to work hard. By the way, may Rutgers beat Iowa tomorrow, just to get that off my chest. Reforming our system of economic incentives to support the dreams of entrepreneurs and small businesses, and at the same time, by the way, to grow our communities. And creating both a diverse and future-focused economy and the diverse, highly skilled workforce needed to succeed in it. On these issues and so many more, we are not only restoring the promise of New Jersey, but we are showing the rest of the nation that progressive policies inherently bring us together. Proving this point, that the policies we advocate for and have enacted bring us together, that's always been important. But I cannot think of any other time in our recent history or memory when this has been more important. And allow me to take a quick side road here for a minute. We are at a critical juncture in our nation's history. I need not tell you that. There are many who are trying to overrun our civic discourse with hateful and intolerant rhetoric, and who want nothing more than to break America into camps of us and them. There are those who will, without any sense of irony, rail against so-called identity politics, all the while claiming victimhood against someone else who looks or speaks differently than they do, and who they not only have never known, but won't ever even try to get to know. There are those who will just deny, not just deny, but seek to undo the results of free and fair elections just because they don't like the outcome. There are those who will clutch the Bible in one hand and the Constitution in the other as they make their claims. But the only thing they ever prove is that they've actually never read either one. I'm the former U.S. ambassador to the Federal Republic of Germany. I had dinner with German Chancellor Olaf Scholz on Monday night of this week. It's the UN General Assembly week. Not a good week to go to New York, by the way. And we had dinner, and he's an old friend. He was the mayor of Hamburg when I was ambassador. And he's a good man, and they're up against it, as you can imagine, with energy and all the pressure to, you know what they're up against given this awful war. He was obsessed with trying to figure out what is going on in America. This is, you hear this around the world. We've got a lot of friends around the world. You guys are supposed to be the beacons. You are the exceptional nation. You are the existentially important nation. What the heck is going on? People are somewhere between obsessed and darn right in abject fear of what could happen here. So these folks that I'm talking about back domestically have put our democratic institutions under constant attack. For those of my generation, we always feared that an attack against our core principles would come from without. Today, we have to be aware of the attack from within. This is what puts our democracy in the most danger. There's always been charlatans in our body politic. That's not new. But the level and depth of the attack on our democratic institutions and what they are now under is unlike anything before. The institutions of our democracy are what keep our democracy. If people cannot have a basic trust that our democratic institutions will stand up for them, that our government has become incapable of supporting we the people, with everyone defined, by the way, in that we, not just some, then our democracy will fall into a tailspin. As I said, I think last week, nothing has been as so sad to watch over recent years as the complete undoing in the respect that used to exist for our U.S. Supreme Court. And this is the result of one thing: the narrow-minded and short-sighted efforts of the former president, of Senator Mitch McConnell, and others on the far right to stack the federal court system from the districts to the Supreme Court with judges who rule based on partisan politics and not on the rule of law. When issues are decided not on a test of right versus wrong, but through a test of red versus blue, something is amiss. And no one should be surprised when such rulings only further divide us and bring disrepute to the notion of justice, which our courts were created to uphold and advance. The same can be said, sadly, of political systems in other states which do not just allow but encourage the crass political gerrymandering we see. Systems in which politicians blatantly choose their voters and relegate those who disagree with them to permanent minority status. And when I see politicians in other states actively working to undermine the right to vote or setting up new barriers to the ballot, it tells me only one thing: that the only way they know they can win is by keeping people out of the voting booth. Who do they fight so hard to keep from voting? I don't think I have to tell you. But in state after state, they certainly don't look like the people who are passing those laws. It says a whole lot about a politician when the only way they believe they can win is not by running on their own merit, but by silencing the voices of a whole lot of folks they believe aren't going to be with them. And by the way, this is leading to a patchwork quilt America. Now, we're on the right side of history. I'll come back to New Jersey now. But if you look at the values that are being debated and adjudicated on: abortion, voting, guns, LGBTQIA+, the environment, I think those are five, probably the big five, but there are many more, sadly. It really now matters in which state you live and in which state you work. I was on the phone, so by the way, we're out there, we're running billboards outside of Miami, Orlando, Dallas, Houston, Atlanta, promoting New Jersey. These jerks have been coming here for decades trying to pull companies out of New Jersey and people out of New Jersey based on the price of living here. So we're returning the favor. I can't tell you how happy it makes me feel, particularly in Texas and Florida, because those two states are run by particular jerks. But I'll give you an example. You saw Indiana sadly passed, and the governor signed the strictest abortion law in the country, about 6 weeks ago. I believe West Virginia has now matched it. No surprise there. And so we're using this as I mentioned, as a tool to attract businesses and families. And I'll tell you an interesting anecdote. I won't tell you the company because it's personal. And by the way, I don't outsource the economic development activities, as Marcia knows. I'm the head of the sales department, so I personally call these folks. And this is the CEO of a very large company there. And this company happens to already have a presence in New Jersey, and we want them to have a bigger presence, and I bet you they will. As a result, directly, because not only of that abortion law, but because we've got an economy that is built for the innovation space, and we've got the workforce, the investment, et cetera. I said, how bad is it? And he said, let me tell you a private story. This is how bad it is. Our daughter is away at school, and she called her mom and me last night, and she said, I'm never coming back to Indiana. And so this is, anyone who thinks this is not going to lead to somewhere between consequential and cataclysmic decisions about where people live and where businesses locate and where the Super Bowl is. And I was having dinner I mentioned Monday night with the chancellor. I was in New York several times this week, unfortunately, given the week. and had dinner with the guys who run FIFA, which is the World Soccer Organization, pitching MetLife for the finals of the 2026. We're not there yet, but I think it's ours to lose. We've already been selected as one of the host venues with New York City, and Eric Adams was right with me the other night. But you know what? We're talking to them as well about values. You know, one of the locations is Dallas, Texas. I don't know how an organization like that claims to stand for people's rights and equity goes to a state like that these days. I could go on. So, in any event, all of this, I want to come back to this. It makes everything that we're doing in New Jersey, I ranted on voting rights, making it as easy as possible for people to vote, to support the independence of our courts and other democratic institutions, and putting the rule of law before the want of politics. It makes everything we're doing here even more critical. And that's the point I want to underscore with you today. Pre-Dobbs, pre all these awful decisions, pre these crazy governors getting elected in the first place, when you roll the tape back, it was already important to stand up for our values in this state. It is now more important than ever before in that patchwork quilt country I described. And therefore, it makes the work that you are undertaking, whether it's statewide or in your communities, even more critical. If we lose our democracy, if we lose our way with our values, we are not going to be able to get any of that back, at least not easily. This nation, by the way, the first to show that a Republican form of government can not only thrive, but become, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, the envy of the world, we cannot also be the first to give up those ideals. We must keep thinking in terms of small d Democratic and small r Republican. I became the chair in July of the National Governors Association. And by the way, I'm about to become the chair of the Democratic Governors Association. And that, you talk about living a split personality. The Democratic Governors Association is all about winning and beating Republican candidates and governors. The National Governors Association is a bipartisan. It's all the American governors, at least those who pay their dues. And the two I referred to a few minutes ago do not pay their dues into that. What's that tell you? Is that incredible? And they still try to come to the meetings. I'm gonna put some of my guys at the doors of the next meeting, but it is a bipartisan organization, and it's a model of the way our country should be. It rotates back and forth chairs between a Republican and a Democrat. So last year, Republican Asa Hutchinson of Arkansas, great guy by the way, was the chair. I was his vice chair. Now I'm the chair, and Spencer Cox, another great up and comer in their party, governor of Utah, is the vice chair. Two reasonable guys. And by the way, there's a whole list of issues that we're not going to be able to put out a press release from the National Governors Association on abortion and reproductive freedom. This is not going to happen. The DGA does and will. And then there's a whole bunch of stuff over here that's low-hanging fruit, but there's a lot of stuff in the middle which you can really sink your teeth into and find a lot of commonality across the aisle. And I said this in July and May when I became chair of the organization. I said, listen, we are partisans third, governors second, and we are Americans first. And that's the point that I made. And that brings me back to a statement that I made about progressive policies doing more, I mentioned a few minutes ago, doing more to bring us together than to pull us apart. When we enact policies that ensure fairness and justice for all, even for those with whom we disagree passionately, we strengthen our democracy. When we enact policies that prepare us for a bright future instead of those which attempt to drag us back to a past that was so dark for so many, we strengthen our democracy. And when we listen to people and work to deliver for them instead of talking down to them and shutting them out to deliver for our self-interest, we strengthen our democracy. I mentioned Marcia at the very top of my remarks. I think that back to that day when I nominated to you and your colleagues to the EDA board. I said on that day, I look back to my remarks and I said, I'll quote myself, this is about doing things in a new way. This is about a future defined by vibrant and sustainable communities in which we all can succeed. This vision must be made by all of us. It must be not just spoken, but it must be our lived experience. And this is why, coming around back to you all, this is why the work of New Jersey Policy Perspective remains as critical as it has ever been. Throughout its own history, NJPP has always thought about how to do things in a new and better way, and how to create a vibrant and sustainable future for all of our communities. A guy once said, and I quote him, "Math is real." Okay, it was Brandon McCoy who said that. He's not here, is he? I love that guy. Give him a hug for me. So Brandon said that. But the fact of the matter is that facts themselves matter, and they have now never mattered more. I mentioned the millionaire's tax as an example. It's not like we're trying to us versus them against millionaires. It's not that we begrudge the American dream and somebody can go from nothing to something. That's good. We encourage that. We want that. We want more of that. But don't tell me about all the moving vans that are going to show up as a result. That's just not the case. Facts matter. We did our research, all of us together, you all and we knew what would happen. And that is exactly what did happen. And by the way, all of the work we're doing, it is work that we must continue to do together. Facts are, in fact, the strongest ammunition we can bring to the fight against those who peddle in fear and misinformation. I'll channel my former boss, former President Barack Obama. There is no red New Jersey or blue New Jersey, no matter how hard some try to divide us. There is only one New Jersey, and it is all of us together. So I look forward, and I mean this with as much sincerity as I can muster, to continuing to stand shoulder to shoulder with everyone here in the work to pull our state together under our common North Star. I thank you again from the bottom of my heart for allowing me to be with you today. I thank you for your partnership. May God bless each and every one of you. Take care, folks.
I think we're ready for lunch now. Thank the governor. Lunch is going to be served in the restaurant, and then we'll come back at 1 o'clock.